Okay, so good morning all. Just to recapitulate, in last class we have discussed about the fundamentals of semiconductors, what is the world energy scenario, why we are talking about green and clean energy, and which role the photovoltaic can play in that aspect, and all the other fundamentals like absorption, transmission, and transport of carriers. And then we slowly discussed about the PN junction, the depletion region, and how a PN junction behaves under light, basically the solar cell characterization, right? We already know how these IV characteristics being formed. Under the fourth quadrant it becomes negative, the power factor becomes negative and it produces power, right? And we also discussed about some parameters like what is VOC, what is JSC, what is ultimately the efficiency, conversion efficiency, and how we characterize them in the lab modules and all these things. So today we will go a little further from there based on that knowledge we have already received, and how to design a solar cell, how to design an efficient solar cell. Because today you will see there are a lot of limitations. We are talking about so many things, that semiconductor can do this and that, solar cell can produce electricity from photons, but what are the limitations? Can we really go beyond our imagination? Can we really achieve the highest efficiency? What is, even in that case, what is the highest efficiency, and what are the factors, intrinsic factors from material point of view, from design point of view, that restricts that number of the efficiency? Because at the end of the day, as I said, the number matters, right? So the more efficient cells you have to produce, you can produce more electricity. That means you have to pay less. If the efficiency is lower and the cost are higher, then we are not very interested in that technology, right? For any technology, if it has to survive in the market, it has to be cost effective as well as very, very efficient compared to any other existing technologies, right? So let us, so basically today's topic will be the efficiency limit of solar cell and the way we are approaching to that limit and beyond that limit for our next generation solar cells. So design of solar cell, what are the losses in solar cell, and the theoretical and experimental limit of efficiency, and many emerging techniques like thin film solar cell, quantum dot, nano structure based solar cells, photon up and down conversion, multi-junction tandem. This kind of emerging concept we will just introduce, right? So let us start. Now the first thing that comes into mind, that how to design a solar cell, right? Let us if we talk about a solar cell, there are four factors, right? Open circuit voltage, short circuit current, fill factor, and ultimately the combined effect goes to the efficiency, conversion efficiency, right? So to understand the behavior of a solar cell, we have to understand behavior of each of these parameters. How this JSC behaves, how this VOC behaves, how fill factor behaves, right? So these are very crucial to understand and to have a fundamental skill to develop a or design a solar cell. So one by one, let us see. So the first thing that we should talk about the short circuit current, that is JSC, right? So yesterday in class, what we said, the short circuit current is basically the maximum current that can be produced by a solar cell when the terminals are shorted. That means there is no voltage flowing, right? Only the current is acting. V equal to 0, J max equal to JSC, right? Now, fundamentally, you try to understand how this current being produced. So basically what happens, that one photon is coming of sufficient energy, right? Sufficient energy means more than the Eg that produce one electron hole pair. And then we separate that electron hole pair and then we collect that electron hole as a free charge and we have current in our hand, right? So what is the fundamental limitation of this thing? The absorption of photon, right? The more and more you can absorb photon, that means basically you can generate more and more JC. If in ideal case we consider for a good solar cell the recombination and other interface problems are not there, not even significantly there, so we can directly correlate that the more photon you absorb, you generate more electron hole pair, you separate them, you collect them, and you have more photocurrent. And the photon that can be absorbed, the limitation is only one limitation from material point of view. The fundamental limitation, what is that? The energy of the photon has to be higher than the band gap of the material. So who is playing the crucial role? The band gap of the material, right? That means if you have smaller and smaller band gap, you can have more and more photons capable, enable to create one electron hole pair, even if they have lower energy, right? Because the band gap is now lower. So basically, if this is the spectra, right now, suppose for any material, you can absorb this much of photons of the spectrum, right? So basically what I can say, the JSC will be the area, right? This much of photon versus this wavelength, if I integrate and multiply by the charge of that electrons and holes, then I will get the photocurrent, right? So basically the area. So if you can broad this shadow part more and more, basically you will create more and more photocurrent. And to broaden this harvesting property, you have to smaller the JSC. Then only you can use more and more photons, even if they have slightly lower energy, but still they will be capable to push one electron from conduction band to valence band, right? So basically, if I plot the band gap versus photocurrent, I will see the higher the band gap, my JSC goes down. The lower the band gap, my JSC goes up. So please remember the point here: higher JSC need lower band gap. Higher band gap creates lower JSC, right? Now, for example, silicon, we have band gaps somewhere around 1.1, and the predicted or calculated JSC that can be achieved is 46 milliampere per centimeter square, right? So, if suppose we have a band gap material of 0.5 electron volt, we can go almost 60 milliampere per centimeter square. Now, it is very fine thing that okay, we just need a small band gap material, right? But it is not so easy because we have other factors also, VOC, fill factor, and then ultimately the conversion efficiency comes. Let us see how this VOC now depends. So what is VOC? Basically, what we are doing, we are accumulating, if you can recall yesterday's last few slides, basically after the charge separation, the positive charge get accumulated in the P side, negative charge got accumulated in the N side, and that accumulation of opposite charges inside the material creates a voltage. It is an electrostatic voltage, right? So for very simplistic way, if I think that okay, I knock one electron from valence band to conduction band, and that electron is sitting now in the conduction band of a single layer material, the potential I create, suppose I knock one electron from here to here, the potential of this system of accumulation of one electron and hole will be Eg by Q. Very simplistic way, right? So now you see, now if this is the photovoltaic, because this creation is due to photovoltaic effect, so this is the photovoltage. So the maximum theoretical photovoltage I can generate is the band gap, right? So now it is in the opposite of the JSC. To have higher and higher voltage, I need to increase the band gap more and more, right? Even in the realistic case, when we talk about the PN junction, we don't get that simplified form that the whole EG. We have some losses because P type and N type side has their Fermi level, and those quasi Fermi levels will align, and some of the voltage will got lost at the interfaces, but still the experimental VOC that we see most cases is still the gap of this quasi Fermi level of this two material, and the quasi Fermi level is again strongly depend on that particular material's band. So even if we call VOC is EFN minus EFP by Q, but that EFN and EFP will broaden if the band gap broadens, right? So they are still proportional. So in conclusion, we can say to have higher VOC for a material, for a solar cell, we need higher band gap material. So earlier we had that to get higher JSC, we need smaller band gap. Now to get higher VOC, we need a higher band gap. So there is a competition going on, right? So they are in an opposite directions. Now about the fill factor, that is another crucial parameter for solar cell efficiency, right? But the fill factor is kind of semi-empirical thing. It depends mostly on the resistances of the material, contact interfaces, how the electronic circuit has been made. If there is more resistance, then more losses will be there. But this fill factor hardly depends on material properties. It mostly depends on the transport of the charge carriers after being separated, right? So interface and the resistance will create a play a crucial role not the material band gap and all these things, right? So ideally we are supposed to get 100% fill factor. This is a perfect square shape, but I showed in the previous class that due to various factors we never got the IV curve like a square curve, rather it becomes parabolic and exponential thing. So that bending comes from the resistance of the materials, and that causes some sort of loss in the fill factor, but that loss is universal. Mostly does not depend on the material. It depends on the device architecture and many other factors, right? So you can safely say from a material point of view, at least we can neglect fill factor part. It is not that significant. It does have some role, but it does not that significant compared to the JSC and VOC. Now, so what happens in the efficiency? So what we have now, we have that the JSC or ISC, that is photocurrent, decreases with increasing EG, and VOC increases with, right? So if I now plot the overall efficiency versus the band gap of the material, there is a competition going on, and that competition will set a peak for this feature, right? There will be one point, one band gap where we can get the max comparatively in terms of with respect to efficiency. We can have a balanced JSC and balanced VOC, which will ultimately give us the highest efficiency for that particular material or particular system, right? So that band gap is known as the ideal band gap of solar cell material, and that has been shown by theoretical and experimental data that 1.45 electron volt somewhere here is the ideal band gap for this system, where we can expect the highest efficiency for solar cells. But what is that number? Even if it is the highest, we are talking about highest peak position, but that is only 31%. Considering the fact that we have the assumptions that we are talking about only one sun intensity in 1.5, and we are talking about only one PN junction solar cell. If that is the case, we can have only 31% of efficient solar cells. That means out of the incoming photons, only 30, if I have 100 photons coming, only 31 photons can be successfully converted into electricity, and remaining 69 photons will be lost. 69% of the incoming energy from the sun at current scenario, no way we can harvest them. So they will be the losses, right? So the picture is not that promising, because right now silicon solar cells are in the range of the commercial silicon cells are in the range of 20-25% efficient, and the production cost, the electricity cost is much higher than the fossil fuel electricity that we are paying every month, right? So even if from 25 the silicon reaches to the highest 31%, but still the cost will be 2 or 3 times higher than the current electricity bill. So this silicon technology and these and that, whatever we are doing in the current format, it's not going to fulfill the purpose that we are looking for. So either we have to find out ways to go beyond this 31%, or we have to find out other materials which is much cheaper than silicon, so that even if it is producing 20 or 25% of efficiency, the production cost will be much lesser than the current electricity bill. So there are two approaches. Either you find out ways to go beyond 31%. The more and more efficiently you convert electricity from photon, you have lower cost, or you find out new materials, new technologies that can give a very easy fabrication things, because silicon, to fabricate a solar cell, you need 1400 degrees centigrade, high purity clean room, and this and that, so much temperature, so much pressure, vacuum things, that causes a lot of excess cost burden on the production side, right? So basically the approach from now onwards, you have to understand that okay, solar technology, photovoltaic technology really do have potential, especially for Asian countries and Middle East countries, to solve the energy crisis. It is cheap and everything, but the current technology that we are using, the silicon technology and the photovoltaic concept that we are using, is not going to solve the purpose. It has to have some modification in terms of efficiency limit and in terms of material production, right? So from here, we'll slowly talk about all these things. But before that, let us understand what is this 69% of loss. Once we understand this 69% of loss, we can come up with solutions to minimize those losses, right? Because ultimately, if we can minimize those losses, those 69%, whatever we minimize, that can be added to the efficiency part, right? So that is our target. Okay, so what are the losses? So for losses, very fundamentally, systematically, we can divide the losses in two terms: fundamental losses and technological losses. Right. So fundamental losses are those losses which is coming directly from the material point of view. Fundamentally, those are always there. We cannot really play with them. And technological losses basically coming from the fabrication side. That when we fabricate the solar cells in industry factories, then we do something with that, right? We deposit layers, we put contacts, we make circuits, we embed them in the panels. So on those each and every step, a lot of things are involved, and that places we can also create some sort of losses, right? Those comes under the technological losses. So basically, the fundamental losses, let us understand that, because ultimately that is directly correlated with the material. So we need to understand what are those losses, and by changing the material structure, crystal structure, or some other intrinsic properties, can we minimize them or not? So the four primary fundamental losses are low energy photon loss, excess energy photon loss, voltage loss, fill factor loss. I will come to them one by one. And the technological losses, as I said, that is coming from the technology part. So basically, those technological losses are coming in terms of optical losses or electrical losses. What are those optical losses? Like reflection from the surface, from the glass, the surface of the module, shadow effect from the contacts, non-absorption of some photons, radiation loss, and the electrical loss can come in terms of ohmic and recombination loss. Ohmic loss is coming from all the circuits and connections we are making, like material itself, the base material, the emitter, contact material, metal junctions that we made, and recombination losses are coming from the surface of the cell, the base region, the space charge region, the material emitter region. So these are the losses that we can primarily summarize, and very significant for solar cell, that 69% of losses. So to recapitulate, there are two kind of losses: fundamental loss, technological loss. Fundamental losses are directly related with the fundamental properties of the materials: low energy photon, excess energy photon, voltage loss, fill factor loss. While the technological loss is coming from the technology part, the fabrication part, optical designing and electrical designing parts. So let us understand a little bit more about the fundamental losses and these losses. So what are these fundamental losses? Why I am talking about the fundamental losses? You will see that out of that 69% of loss, more than 50% losses are fundamental loss. So in that way, the picture is not that promising, right? Right, because the fundamental losses, to tackle with them, is kind of beyond our control. So you have to really go out of the box to encounter those fundamental losses. So one of such losses is transmission loss. What is the transmission loss? That I have ECEV, that is basically EG for a particular material. Suppose the ideal material is 1.45 eV. If this 1.45 eV, so any photon whose energy is less than 1.45 eV, they cannot be absorbed. They would be simply transmitted by that material. Those photons are known as red photon, and 1.45 eV is a large number. A lot of photons can be having lesser energy than that, right? So if you calculate those kind of losses, it comes around 23% of transmission, which is high number, right? So ideal utilization is that when your H nu equal to Eg, that means you can generate one electron volt. But what about the photons which are having greater than 1.45 Eg? EV of the band gap energy, right? Suppose I have like 2 EV, right? Or 1.65 EV, 3 EV, 5 EV, anything more than 1.45 EV. Now, what will happen for those photons? They will obviously generate one electron hole pair, but we need our electron to be here to get separated, right? Now, they will create electrons with higher energy, and those electrons will release their energy and come back to EC. But this amount of release energy will be just a thermal loss that cannot be utilized for producing electricity, right? And unfortunately, that loss is again 33%. So 23% of transmission loss, 33% of thermal loss, that belongs to 56% of loss, right? So just the 56% of loss is coming from the fact that one material has one band gap, and few photons only having matching energy, and the rest either lower energy or higher energy. And in both cases, they produce a lot of losses that is beyond our control, right? Because we cannot have a material with having flexible kind of band gap, right? So one material is always having one band. So that is the primary limitation of this field. And apart from that, what we said, that voltage losses are coming from the quasi-Fermi level distribution, right? And fill factor losses are coming from the material resistance. Apart from that, as I said, the photon losses can arise from the reflection of the silicon surface, the glass surface, or when you make metal contacts, under the contact you have dark shadows, right? Those region will not have opportunity to harvest any photons, so those shadow effects, or when you install your solar panel on a roof, and maybe you have a nearby plant or a tree or some other roof corners, other buildings, that shadow comes sometime in the daytime. So those losses are technological losses. That is again like 10-15% of losses. But fortunately, those losses we can do many tricks, right? Either we can use transparent conducting electrodes, so that electrode shadow effect does not come. Then we can incline the solar panels in such an angle that shadow effect does not come, right? We can use anti-reflection coating so that the surface reflection got reduced. So those tricks I can do. But fundamental losses, 56% of fundamental losses, to tackle with that, that is very, very crucial, because 56% is a huge number, right? Even if we can take out half of them, our efficiency of the solar cell theoretical limitation can go beyond 50%, and that will solve every problem of this current human civilization, at least from the energy point of view, right? Okay, so let us also see what is the equivalent circuit of a solar cell. Now we understand everything, the losses and all these things. So how to make an equivalent circuit? Because ultimately, to make a panel and all these things, we need to understand the solar cell as a electronic thing, like we do for transistor, diode, and all these things. We have a equivalent kind of thing, right? So that we can utilize them as an electronic component wherever is required, and you can design our circuit. So equivalent circuit for solar cell is equally important. So what is basically a solar cell? Solar cell is a current source, right, which gives us current under photon, but it also has some minority carrier movement, which is equivalent to a diode connected in opposite polarity, and it also has some resistances from the material as well as from the contact and all these things, right? So that we consider two kind of resistances. One is in series, one is in parallel. So this is basically the overall equivalent circuit of a solar cell. I can say one ideal current source which is giving me the photocurrent, and one diode connected in opposite polarity of this current source, which is giving me the diode currents, the dark current, and all these things. And these are the resistances coming from anywhere it can come, and these are the resistances that influences the fill factor and other things, right? So ideally, what we want, we don't want any resistance in the series of the circuit, right? Because we want our charge carriers to flow freely. So ideally, for a very, very good solar cell, this RS should be 0, and this RP, that belongs to the leakage, right? So this RP should be infinite, right? So for ideal solar cell, I want my RS, the series resistance, to be 0, and the parallel or the leakage resistance to be infinite. But that is not possible, but at least we try to keep them minimum as possible in the ohm scale, and as maximum as possible in the mega ohm or giga ohm scale, right? So what if they are not like this? If they have a variation from 0, and suppose some circuit has a lot of high RS, some material has higher RS, and some material has very low RP, then what happens? That seriously affect the fill factor. As I said in my previous discussion, that fill factor is more like the circuit thing rather than the material thing. So here you can understand that thing. Suppose this curve is showing how the fill factor changes if I change the RS. Okay, before that, please pay attention here that this is the modified equation of a solar cell for a equivalent circuit, where you have everything, current density, intrinsic current density, that is the saturated current, voltage, and everything is there. But what we included the effect of RS and RP here, and the photocurrent is also there, right? So the direct current now has been modified in terms of RS and RP. Okay, so what I was saying, that suppose instead of R equal to 0, I have increasing RS. So what happened? So if I keep increasing the RS for some instant, the RS is basically the slope at this equal to 0, right? So this you can see, the more and more RS will create this slope tilted. So basically you will have a saturation or S-shape kind of IV characteristics near this zero voltage region, and overall fill factor will turn from this square kind of thing to more flat, right? Similarly, if I have RP from very high RP to very low RP, the RP is again the slope at this position where B equal to 0 and around the JSC condition. So now the slope at the JSC part will get flattened, and you will see the fill factor is equally getting deviated. So for your devices, suppose some of you, if you have a opportunity to work on a lab to make solar cells like our student does, a small solar cell in daily life, you will see one day you make a solar cell of same material XYZ and you are getting a very high efficiency, suppose 7%, 10% in lab scale. The other day you are getting only 2%, and the cell is showing exactly same JSC and QC and made of same material. Now you can understand that somehow the fill factor has been affected, and somehow you have connected your circuit or designed your device such a way the fill factor has been deviated in terms of RS and RP, right? So these things always help us to understand how this equivalent circuit, especially help us to understand how these devices are working in a lab material when you make some new kind of devices, right? Okay, so the next important thing that we should understand, at the end of the day, our solar cells are not going to stay inside our lab, right? They are going to stay on the roof in the real world, under the climate, environment, whatever we have, winter, summer, rainy, right? So the question is that, does the environment or any other factors affect the efficiency of the solar cells? Is it continuously changing the solar cell efficiency, or it is a fixed? So what has been identified that apart from any other factors, two environmental factors largely affect the efficiency. One is temperature and the other is radiation. Radiation means the intensity of the solar photons are coming. Now you see every day from dusk to dawn, if you see the intensity of sun varies, right? Morning it has low intensity, evening it has low intensity, in the afternoon it has high intensity. That means that can create fluctuation in the efficiency. Similarly, temperature also varies. Morning and evening we have less temperature, afternoon we have more temperature, winter we have less temperature, summer we have more temperature. The intensity also varies with season to season, right? So these two factors are very crucial. So how they behave? Now, if you understand, if you remember the efficiency equation for solar cell, it is basically IC VOC fill factor by PN, right? P in, the input power from the sun, right? So for radiation, so what happens if I increase the radiation with daytime, linearly P in increases, and what we have seen that ISC also increases, which is photocurrent, with more number of photons. So I can say that ISC by PIN is cancelling each other, they are linear. And also fill factor largely depends on the resistance and all these things, so they do not depend on the intensity of light. So I can cancel these things. So now my efficiency directly varies with the variation of VOC intensity, right? So what is VOC? VOC is KT by Q log photocurrent by saturation current, right? Class 1, you can neglect this one because photocurrent is usually very, very high. So KT by Q log IL by I naught, right? Now, if you take a differentiation, delta n by n, you will come up with a number, something like that, KT by Q log n by VOC. Okay, because only the VOC is changing. Right? Now, if in case with radiation VOC is increasing, the efficiency will increase. If for some material VOC is decreasing with the intensity, then VOC will the efficiency will also decrease. For silicon, it has been seen that with radiation, if we take silicon, it almost increases 4 times of its natural. 4% of increase we have seen for silicon solar cells with radiation. So this is a good thing, right? So if you have a solar cell of 21% thing, and in case suppose your intensity is varying and it is going higher intensity, that means you will have 4% more efficiency. That is fine. But what about the temperature? Increasing intensity will also increase temperature, right? So then you see again that part is controlled by VOC because every other things, as I said, is almost constant, right? Now VOC has this I naught factor, the saturation current, which is again can be expressed something like this, and depends on the thermal generation because that is the saturation current, right? That depends on the thermal generation and the band gap. So what has been seen, if you take I naught like this and VOC of that equation, then if you take a time derivative of that, the temperature derivative of VOC, you will come up something like this: 1 over T VOC minus Eg by Q. Now, go back to this slide. What I said, the VOC ideally should be Eg by Q. But because of the p-n junction and because of this Quasi-Fermi level distribution, we have always some losses and the VOC is slightly lower than the Eg by Q. Right? So if VOC is slightly lower than Eg by Q in real world, that means this term VOC minus Eg by Q is always negative. That means with increasing temperature, my VOC has to be going down, decreasing for any material. You take any material, if you are talking about a p-n junction, VOC will have some losses compared to the ideal band gap condition, and that therefore the dVOCdT, that is the temperature variation of VOC, will become negative, right? So that means if my temperature is varying, suppose the room temperature is 30 degrees centigrade and outside temperature is 50 degrees centigrade or 40 degrees centigrade in summer. Now these cells are mostly embedded inside a glass and metal like a panel. If you have seen the solar panels, you will see the top surface is glass, bottom surface is aluminum. If the ambient temperature is 40 due to the greenhouse effect and all these things, the inside temperature of the modules will be 65, 70 degrees centigrade. So that means it will be a huge change, right? So there will be a significant drop of efficiency of solar modules due to the temperature variation, right? So we have to have some kind of, if that variation is too much and that is affecting significantly the efficiency, we have to have some cooling kind of stuff, cooling arrangement, so that my panel temperature stays at 30 degrees centigrade only, whatever the ambient temperature is. But again, that will add some cost to the overall solar panels and energy thing, right? Because we have to use external cooling things, and that will require more electricity and more costing, right? Okay, so these are the basic fundamental things that we were talking about. So far what we discussed, that how this JCVOC depends on the materials, how the efficiency balancing is coming, what are the losses 69% have, and then now we also know what are the variation of the temperature. It is real life kind of application these solar modules face. Now let us see why this 31% that you are talking about, is it thermodynamically feasible? That 31% or what the thermodynamics gives us. The 31%, okay, we have this problem of band gap and all these things. Suppose in an ideal world, we solve all these problems. All the limitations, real world limitations we are talking about, we can solve it given a chance. Then what is the maximum efficiency we can achieve from a sun? Thermodynamics law can give us some idea on that, right? The sun is basically a black body radiation, right? It is having fusion reactions and it is emitting so many photons and these and that. So it can be considered as a Carnot cycle going on between sun and the solar cell. Some energy is coming in form of photons from the sun, which is now getting converted into work by solar panels. So let us consider the solar panel as engine and the sun as the black body radiation, right? So if that is the case, the finite temperature of sun is around this much, and let us take the room temperature around 300 Kelvin. And if we can use that simplistic formula of Carnot cycle, efficiency of this conversion can be 95%, which is huge, right? We are only talking about 31%, but thermodynamics is saying that you can achieve 95% if you can solve all of your problems one by one, all of the limitations one by one. But this 91% is little bit of overestimation, because for such equation to be hold true, we have an assumption there is no change of entropy, right? But when we are talking about a system of such a different temperature, almost 1000, 5000, 6000 degree Kelvin versus 300 Kelvin, we cannot assume that the entropy is not changing. So it is always non-zero. So the radiation of Stephen's law and all these things, the flux you have to consider that sun is spreading some flux, we are receiving some flux. Again, we are also spreading some flux from the solar panels, right? So even if that case, if we take Stephen Boltzmann's law, the radiation, the net flux we calculate, and that we consider in the work cycle and all these things, then also we will get 85% of conversion efficiency limit. So thermodynamics, the law of physics is saying you that you can at least convert 85%, which is the, I mean, if somebody can come up with the plan of an 85% conversion for a solar cell, he will readily get Nobel Prize, right? So 85% is allowed with the laws of physics and thermodynamics, and we are getting only 31%. So what is the problem? There lies the Shockley-Queisel limit. The Shockley-Queisel limit that we saw already discussed in terms of other. The primary fact is that from 85% of efficiency, we are dragged down to 31% of efficiency because of these two factors. And that is mainly due to the fact that we have only one band gap, right? So if I see the overall spectrum of the black body radiation, suppose this is my black body radiation, and this is the only photon efficiency of a single junction solar cell. These are the thermal loss, these are the transmission loss, these are all thermal loss, right? So this photon efficiency comes from the fact that I have only one band gap with a tail, right? Efficiency, I can write down the work done by the photon energy, right? So this Shockley-Queisel limit takes that balance equation and all these things, and I'm not going to the mathematics of that, but you understand that these two losses make everything such a lower number from 85% to thing. So how to overcome this thing? To overcome this technology, we are now this limitation. We are now talking about many other approaches, because the primary problem is that band gap, right? So we are talking about splitting the solar spectrum, different part of the solar spectrum we want to absorb by different materials, multi-junction tandem cells, spectral modification. Suppose if I can convert these wavelengths and these wavelengths into this wavelength somehow, then it will be absorbed by the same material, or hot carrier junction and all these things. I will come one by one. So the first idea that multi-junction tandem solar cell that directly encounter the concept of that I have one material with one band gap. Suppose I had this, as I showed, this material as a single junction. This can only absorb or harvest this much of thing. Suppose if the spectra has 1,000 of photons, in real condition, if I can have 1,000 of materials of different band gap, and each of the band gap is capable to absorb one of the photon, that will be the ideal thing. Then I can absorb all the photons, right? But that is not possible, because periodic table, even if we make all the permutation combination, we do not have so many semiconductors in hand. But at least what we can do, we can use more than one material and choose, suppose 3 materials I am using, and we are choosing the materials band gap such a way that in an average, the material 1 can absorb from this to this, material 2 can absorb from this to that, and the material 3 can absorb from this to this again. So overall, now the combination of these 3 material can absorb much larger amount of photons compared to the cell 2 only. In average, now I can absorb from this to this, right? So that will broaden the photon absorption capability. So this is the primary concept of multi-junction or tandem solar cell, where we utilize more than one material and we form a series of solar cells one by one, so that we can harvest in a complementary region of the solar spectrum, and overall absorption of the total device is much broader than single device. So basically, we are trying to encounter that thermal and transmission loss by utilizing more number of materials, more number of suitable materials, right? So suppose my cell 3 now can create this much of current, this much of voltage. this much, cell 2 can create this much of current and this much of voltage, this much of current, this much voltage by cell 1. Then and these are the suppose cell 1, 2 and 3 in series from electronic point of view. So I can produce this much of voltage and this much of current, right? So this is basically the tandem cell concept. This is one of the typical picture schematic diagram of tandem devices, very high efficient devices, which is made of gallium, indium phosphide, gallium, indium arsenide, and germanium. These three materials, one by one. You can see instead of one layer, we are using I must say 10 or 20 layers to make these devices, right? And we can harvest from 300 nanometer to 1700, 1800 nanometer. So we have broadened the energy, and these kind of cells are showing like 35%, 40% efficiency. So what is the challenges of these devices? If we can do it, why can't we do it for every other materials, and why can't we go for 50%, 60% device? The challenge of this thing is that when we talk about a p-n junction, the charge separation only takes place when you have step up and step down kind of band structure, right? You need something like this, right? Like a stairs. Now, choosing materials which have complementary absorption as well as such a band gap, band structure, conduction band, valence band that can create such kind of structure, that is very difficult. If we create anything like this charge carrier will come here and will face a barrier and they will get trapped. Similarly, if some hole comes from here, sit here, now it cannot move, right? So it will face some barrier there. So these barriers we cannot choose. So there are a lot of material selection limitations for tandem devices which restricts their successful implementation. First, that is the thing. And second thing, depositing pure thin films one after another has a lot of problems because they do not match, having matching of their lattice spacing and all this thing. A lot of stress and strain creates, and ultimately that hamper the flow of electrons and holes, right? The charge transport property got affected and all these things. That is why even if on paper it looks very promising, but in real world, to have successful and efficient tandem devices are really critical and very costly. So ultimately we are trying to minimize the cost and maximize the efficiency, but we see that we can maximize the efficiency, but not in terms of cost minimize. The cost goes even higher, right? Okay, so that was the limitation because we had to select different materials for different region. So from there, the concept of quantum dot solar cell comes. The nanostructure, the quantum dot solar cell comes. Because if you remember, when I talk about how that band gap and all this thing forms, we discussed that band gap forms because of the multi-atom system, many atom system, they are interacting and they have discrete energy states, but when they are interacting, that interaction will spread the bands and that will create a band gap. Now, lesser the spreading, higher the band gap. So when we talk about quantum dots or nanostructures, what we do, we minimize the dimension of the material. That means we minimize the symmetry of that atoms. We minimize such interaction of atomic interaction, which creates the band gap. In that way, we basically we can maximize or vary the band gap of same material. Suppose in terms of silicon, for example, we took silicon, which is having dimension, certain dimension. Now we make silicon, this is suppose the bulk silicon band gap. Now if we talk about silicon quantum dot, the band gap will increase. If we talk about even smaller quantum dots or nanostructures, even smaller, the band gap will further decrease because this split will come here for the lower dimension and more and more lower dimension, it will go higher and higher, and this band gap will keep on changing. So eventually we can very approximately write the band gap of the ultimate band gap is the band gap of the bulk plus k by d square. K is the quantum confinement parameter and d is the diameter, that is the dimension of the material. So lesser and lesser d will create higher and higher Eg. So that gives us a very unique feature in our hand. So earlier for tandem devices, we say that choosing different materials for different location and having with ideal band structure is the challenge. Now here we are not choosing different materials. What we can do, we can take same material, silicon, and then we can make different dimensions of silicon nanoparticles having a series of different band gap, right? So the mismatch between two materials we can eliminate here, right? So now we can have different size of silicon quantum dots and nanoparticles. We can embed them in a dielectric matrix and we can deposit them on layer by layer, and we can eventually consider that we have cell 1 which is made of silicon, and then cell 2 which is made of silicon only, but in terms of nanoparticles and quantum dot which is having higher band gap. So now the variation of band gap we can create utilizing the same material. So that challenge of other things like selecting materials and having ideal band gap and all these things can be minimized a lot of, in a very fundamental way by quantum dot and nanostructure concepts. So this is a very promising approach, and a lot of people are working nowadays on this approach, and you can see a lot of papers are coming and products are on the verge of coming. Only one problem is that when we talk about the challenge is that when we talk about nanoparticles, when you minimize the dimension from bulk to nano, we always play with the stability of the material. We are breaking the symmetry of the material, atomic symmetry. We are making them soft. We are making them fragile. So we are playing with their life cycle, right? Suppose for bulk silicon, if the solar panel can survive like 15 years, for nanoparticles and all these things, they have much shorter lifespan. So that is another point which the scientist has to come up somehow to maximize their lifespan. Otherwise, this is a very promising technique. One more technique, that intermediate band gap or impurity PP. Like to say, oh, I have a power cut, so I don't know how long it will survive. Anyway, the intermediate band gap, what we do there, instead of nanostructures and all these things, the limitation was, what was the limitation? That I have a band gap, e.g. EV, so not many photons can be absorbed. Some will have lower energy, some will have higher energy. So what we can do, we can intentionally put impurities or trap states in a balanced way, of course, within the material during the doping and all this, so that they have their energy states in between the band gap of the primary material in the sub band gap region. So those impurity states now can help us to harvest lower energy photons. How? Suppose one photon which was having this much of energy could not excite one electron from conduction band to valence band. Now it can only excite one electron from here to the sub band gap impurity level, and other similar photon can now make it to jump from there to there. So suppose initially for a band gap of 1.45, if I had a photon of 0.7 electron volt, which was not capable to generate any electron hole pair, but now such two photons having 7 electron volt can join hand and can at least excite one electron hole pair through the impurity levels, right? So this kind of technology is also coming up, but the problem of this intermediate band gap or impurity band gap things are that they do not only help in generation, they do help in the recombination also. So the more you have such kind of trap states and impurity level, the recombination becomes also easier, and the transport becomes a little bit tricky, because when your charged particles are going through this conduction band management, they also feel like to jump to the impurity level and get trapped, right? Otherwise, if you can find a balance, of the impurity level. Suppose you have a 25% efficient solar cells and you can find a balance of that particular material, you can very easily go from 25% to 27%, 28% or 30% if a device efficiency without much cost and all these things. This fabrication technology is very easy compared to the tandem or this nanostructure and all these things, right? Very cost effective. But the problem here is again some challenges are that you have to minimize those recombinations also. Now, so far, we were talking about modification of the band gap, right? Modification of the band gap, selection of new materials and these and that to capture more photons. Now, suppose, let me go back to that spectra again. Suppose, instead of choosing new material, what if we can come up with some technology that whatever photons is being absorbed by the material, that is fine. The remaining photons wavelength or energy we can convert into the photon energy which is desired for this particular material. So I if I can convert all these photons wavelength from these to these, instead of from these to this 0 to 1.5, but basically 1.7 or something, and these to these, if I can convert those photons of a equivalent energy of this, then the same single material is capable enough to absorb all these photons. I don't need, I have to change the device anyway, right? I just need to modify the spectra. I have to some sort of optical arrangement I have to make, which will take all these photons and release the photons of this energy, which will take all these photons and release the photon of this much energy, right? So that is known as spectral modification, or basically a very emerging technology, photon up and down photon energy. Right. So let us discuss how this down conversion working first. So down conversion is basically this device configuration changes requires photon high energy photons. Basically, you make an arrangement or material, you use a material where these high energy photons will now get absorbed, and after getting absorbed from this material, that material will release low energy photons, and those low energy photons will now get absorbed by the cell, right? So high energy photons got absorbed in the layer and emits two low energy photons, which are then got reabsorbed by the active layer. So we put basically this down converting material on the top of the cell, right? So any absorption photon which is being absorbed by the cell, that is fine. The other high energy photons now will be absorbed by these down converting material, and now this material will release two low energy photons, which are now being absorbed by the cell itself, right? So this is the primary concept of down conversion, and one of such very few such very efficient down converting material are silicon oxide, silicon nitride, etc., etc. Right? Similarly, for up conversion, what we do, we put one up converting material on the bottom of the cell, and the photons which are having lower energy than the band gap, they will pass through the material, transmission loss, and now they will be absorbed by the up converting material, small photons, and when that up converting material emit those photons, it will combine them and it will make them a bigger photon, larger photon, energy photon, and that will be absorbed by the cell. So this is known as the up conversion material. So one of such material is NaYF4 with 20% of Ar3 plus. So this concept is very, very good. You don't have to change anything of the cell. You just have to find out up converting, down converting material, and you have to make extra layers on top of bottom of the cells. But thing is that we really do not have right now very, very efficient up conversion or down conversion material. Otherwise, if somebody can come up with such materials, the problem can be solved in an overnight situation, right? Because we really do not have to change anything with the cell fabrication. Cell fabrication is standard, and we just need to spray or spread some kind of painting kind of thing on top and bottom of the cells. That will serve our purpose, right? Anyway, we do have some materials like silicon oxide, silicon nitride, and this NaYF4 and all these things, and these are some typical results where you can see the spectra matching is getting broadened by this. This was the typical cell. Then with up and down conversion, their photocurrent generation versus wavelength becomes so flat and broadened because of the conversion of. Now the same cell is now having broader responses, right? So the last thing for today that I would like to discuss about emerging technique is hot carrier solar cells. What are these hot carrier? Hot carrier solar cells, from the name itself, you can understand that thermal losses. We are basically trying to target the thermal losses. Because the thermal losses are due to the photons which are having higher energy, and the electron goes to the higher state within the conduction band and loss having high kinetic energy, and then it come back to the edge of the conduction band and lose that energy in terms of heat, right? So those carriers are not known as hot carriers. When I shine photons with much higher energy than the Eg, that goes to the higher state. So this carrier is known as hot carrier. Now this carrier gets some opportunity to come down and release this energy, right? What if we don't give them this opportunity to come down? What if we have arrangement such a way that even at the higher energy state of the conduction band, we have some contacts, we have some metal electrodes that can, from the high state itself, can take out the hot carrier. Then these loss will not be anymore a loss, right? We will take out the electrons in terms of its own energy state. If it is on the higher states, it is getting extracted from that energy states only. It does not have to lose its energy and come back to the conduction band edge, right? So this is the concept of hot carrier solar cell, where we select multiple contacts, few selective contacts, few contacts to extract all the charge carriers, most majority of the charge carriers which are at the edge of the conduction band and valence band. And we can also select energy selective contacts we can use, which can extract the hot carriers from their hot state itself. So that can minimize the thermal losses significantly. But this is a very, I would say, very optimistic plan or technology, because to have such energy states we need electronic metal electrodes of different work function at each and every states density of states of conduction band, which is not feasible at all. So few energy selective contacts of course we can make, and few of the hot carriers we can take out, but that will not be very significant. So this is an emerging technology, but the limitations are that you have to use energy selective contacts, and to do that it is very difficult to feasible of this technology and all this. So that is all. So to summarize, today we understand the limitation and efficiency limitation of real world solar cells. Then we understand the dependencies of various parameters. We also understand the thermodynamic loss, efficiency limit. Why is it 85%? Why 31%? And then we will talk about various approach we are taking nowadays, adopting in terms of modification of band gap by nanostructures, quantum dot, in terms of making tandem solar cells by utilizing a stack of different materials, in terms of targeting the solar spectrum itself without changing the materials like up conversion, down conversion, and many other things, right? So here I will stop today. So if anyone has any queries and questions, feel free to ask me now.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Karat, for making the presentation or the lecture on time. I have already reduced his half an hour time, so whatever he already managed his time. Thank you, Supravar. If you have any question, please ask him. We have some time. If you have any question, you can ask him today as well as yesterday's question also. Yesterday also we don't have time, that's why we're unable to ask the question. Please ask question if you have any. In the meantime, I'm sharing the test link here in your chat box. Please give the test as well as you can ask the question in the meantime.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
It's a very nice presentation, sir, and thank you very much for, for such great details. You have described the things in nice and very well explained. The things are from the very basic of the solar cell towards the until till the hot carrier solar cell. I have one specific question that in your slide regarding the effect of the radiation. In that slide, what is N?
Okay, this N, right? This N is basically, if you see, this is coming, this is coming from the fact that this N is coming here. So this is coming from the fact that IS. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this ISC is the photocurrent, right? So what I can say here, that the ISC is a linear function of the light intensity, right? Or light current. So that ISC is basically now replaced by N into IL, where IL is the light current and N is the light intensity factor. So, right? So N can be 1 sun, N can be half sun, N can be 2 sun, depending on the light intensity. So that N is basically showing the intensity of the light, nothing else. So more and more intensity, the N, if you take instead of 1, if you take 5 sun, so you will see that efficiency. So this eta is basically the efficiency, and this N directly relates the light intensity parameter. That's all. It's a linear function.
Okay. So just last question. So there is many technologies are there regarding the increase. Regarding the increasement of the. How to increase the efficiency, why don't we use some internal device like like transistor or MOS, for example, MOSFET, so to increase the
Sorry, your voice is breaking. Can you repeat one more time? Hello.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
No, your voice was breaking. So can you repeat one more time, please?
Yes, that is the, I am asking, instead of using simple diode, why don't you use some amplifying device like MOSFET as a solar cell? That can increase the cell efficiency also.
Yeah, that is actually a good question. But you see, the idea, how you amplify something by MOSFET? Tell me.
Because
You
if they,
you amplify the signature in MOSFET by applying some kind of bias, right? MOSFET can only amplify the signal when it is under biasing, right? On, right? So you have to give some kind of external power to make your amplifier working in an amplified version. But the basic idea of solar cell is that it will not consume any power, it will only produce power from the sun. So I can also add a battery, right? I can also add a battery to the diode and I can keep it under a reverse bias condition or forward bias condition to make it more efficient, right? That is possible, but that increment in efficiency is a pseudo increment. That is you are getting by giving some external power, which is not the idea of a solar cell. Photovoltaic devices are supposed to work in an unbiased condition. It will only receive photons from the sun and will give you electricity. No other batteries, no other biasing, no other electrical input it should have. It should only play with the optically. So that is why we cannot use anything else which can amplify all these signals. Even I can add one voltage amplifier or current amplifier, right?
yes,
I can in that case I can add a current amplifier at the external circuit of the solar cell, and I can say that, see, my current was 5 ampere, but now it is 15 ampere, so my efficiency increases. But that efficiency does not increase. The efficiency is still same. You are increasing the current by another circuit which is consuming power. So that is not the idea, right?
oh, thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a very good presentation, sir. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
I have a question, sir, regarding quantum dot solar cell. That you told that the quantum dot solar cell is a very low short lifetime, and if we doped something, means heteroatom in dope in the quantum dot, and it can be overcome the short lifetime.
Doping quantum dot is significantly difficult because quantum dots are nano, even lesser than size. So you hardly can dope the quantum dot. Basically, we dope the other materials with quantum dots.
Yeah, because actually recent trends are going for heteroatom dope quantum dot, and if we dope something like nitrogen or boron, something.
Yes, those kind of doping is possible. So that are like more like chemical doping, not a physical doping, right? So yes. This kind of approaches are coming. That, see, when I talk about the lifetime in terms of mostly for solar cell, lifetimes are like how quickly it got oxidized, how quickly it reacts with moisture, because oxygen and moisture are the two things that your solar cell has to face every day, right? So those reaction with moisture and oxygen also depends on the I would say for semiconductors the ionization potential of that particular material, and if it is metal, the work function of the material. So what people are trying to modify the chemistry of that quantum dot such a way that its ionization potential does not match with the oxygen reaction or moisture reaction. Then what happens? Those molecules are intrinsically stable against those oxygen and moisture, right? So that is one way people are trying, of course, people are trying to maximize the lifetime of the quantum dots and all these things. Yes, that can be possible.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Suprabhat.